A billionaire saved a drunk waitress from trouble. The next day, she didn't pretend to forget. What if one act of kindness could change two lives forever? Claire Martinez pushed her back against the cold brick wall of Murphy's diner. Her heart was beating fast as three men trapped her in the alley behind the restaurant. The smell of old beer and cigarettes filled the night air, and her hands shook as she held her purse tightly. She'd only had 2 drinks after her work shift ended, but being so tired from working extra shifts for weeks had affected her more than she thought it would. Now these strangers had followed her outside, and their voices were getting louder and meaner with each second that passed. Just when fear started to take over, a calm voice broke through the darkness. "I think the lady would like to be left alone." A tall man stepped into the dim light of the street lamp. His fancy coat looked very different from the dirty alley. Claire had never seen him before, but something about the way he stood there made her feel safe for the first time all evening. She didn't know that this stranger's simple kind act would reveal secrets that would change everything. "Where are you watching from tonight?" The 3 men stopped when they saw James Richardson come out from the shadows. His calm confidence and the way he held himself showed he was someone who wasn't easily scared. "We're just having a friendly conversation," one of them mumbled. But James stepped closer, his phone already in his hand. "I'm sure you are, but I think it's time for that conversation to end." His voice stayed calm, almost like regular talking, but there was strength underneath. Claire watched as the men looked at each other, clearly thinking about whether this well-dressed stranger was worth the trouble. After a tense moment, they walked away, complaining about people who couldn't mind their own business. Claire leaned against the wall, her legs suddenly feeling weak. "Thank you," she whispered, feeling embarrassed by how shaky her voice sounded. James came closer slowly, keeping his distance so he wouldn't scare her more. "Are you hurt? Do you need me to call someone?" She shook her head, then immediately wished she hadn't because dizziness came over her. "I'm fine, just stupid. I should have known better than to come out here alone." James noticed the name tag still pinned to her uniform and the tiredness on her face. "You work at Murphy's?" When she nodded, he looked toward the diner's back door. "How about I walk you to your car?" "I don't have a car," Claire admitted, feeling another wave of embarrassment. "I take the bus, but the last one has already left. I was trying to decide whether to call a taxi or just—" She waved her hand vaguely, not wanting to admit she'd been planning to walk the 12 blocks home through neighborhoods that weren't much safer than this alley. James pulled out his phone right away. "I'm calling you a ride. No arguments." As he arranged for a car service, Claire studied his face in the streetlight. He was probably in his early 40s with kind eyes and an easy way of taking charge without making her feel helpless. When he finished the call, he turned back to her with a gentle smile. "The car will be here in 5 minutes. Will you let me wait with you?" As they waited in comfortable silence, Claire found herself really looking at the man who had helped her. His coat probably cost more than she made in 2 months, and his watch caught the light in a way that showed it was really expensive. "You're not from around here," she said softly. It wasn't a question. James smiled a little. "Is it that obvious?" He pointed toward his clothes. "I was at a business dinner across town. Sometimes I take walks afterward to clear my head." Claire nodded, understanding the need to relax after a long day. "I do the same thing. Well, I used to before." She stopped talking, not wanting to bother this stranger with her problems. "Before what?" James asked gently, and something in his voice made Claire want to answer honestly. "Before I started working 3 jobs. My mom's in a care home and the insurance doesn't cover everything." The words came out in a rush, as if she'd been holding them in for too long. "I never used to drink, not really. But tonight was it was a hard day. A hard month, actually." James listened without judging, giving her his full attention. "What happened today specifically?" Claire hesitated, then figured she'd already shared this much. "One of Mom's doctors wants to try a new treatment, but it's expensive. I've been trying to save up, but every time I get close, something else comes up. Today, I found out I need to come up with another $2,000 by next week, or—" She shrugged helplessly. The car arrived just as Claire felt tears about to fall. James opened the door for her, and as she slid into the back seat, she looked up at him with real thankfulness. "I don't even know your name," she realized. "James," he said simply. "And you're Claire." She blinked in surprise, then remembered her name tag. "Thank you, James. Really, I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't shown up." James closed the door gently and watched as the car pulled away, but he didn't go to his own car right away. Instead, he stood in the alley for a long moment, thinking about tired eyes and a daughter working 3 jobs to save her mother. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. Something about Claire's story had gotten under his skin in a way he hadn't expected, As a successful businessman, he was used to solving problems with money, but this felt different, more personal. He made a mental note of the diner's name as he finally walked to his car. The next morning, Claire woke up with a pounding headache and her stomach full of regret. As memories of the night before came flooding back, she buried her face in her pillow and groaned. She told a complete stranger about her mother's medical bills, about her money struggles, about things she barely admitted to herself. The embarrassment was almost worse than the hangover. She'd always been independent, proud of handling things on her own. Now some wealthy businessman probably thought she was a charity case looking for a handout. Despite feeling so embarrassed, Claire had to work. She couldn't afford to miss a shift, especially not now. Murphy's diner was busy with the usual breakfast crowd when she arrived, and she threw herself into the familiar routine of taking orders and refilling coffee cups. She'd almost managed to push thoughts of the night before aside when she heard a familiar voice. "Excuse me, is Claire working today?" Her head snapped up to see James standing at the hostess station, looking perfectly put together in a crisp shirt and dark jeans. Their eyes met across the diner, and Claire felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She walked toward him slowly, notepad held tightly in her hands. "You probably think I make a habit of getting drunk and sharing my problems with strangers," she said right away. James's face was serious but kind. "Actually, I think you're someone who's been carrying too much alone for too long." His directness caught her off guard. "I came to apologize," she started, but he held up a hand. "No apology necessary, but I was hoping we could talk. Would you have a few minutes when your shift ends?" Claire looked around the busy diner, very aware that several of her co-workers were watching with obvious curiosity. "I don't get off until 3, she said uncertainly. "I'll wait," James replied simply, then chose a corner booth where he could work on his laptop without getting in anyone's way. For the rest of her shift, Claire was very aware of his presence. He ordered coffee and a sandwich, left big tips, and treated her with the same quiet respect he'd shown the night before. No pity, no looking down on her, just simple human decency. As closing time got closer, Claire's nerves were worn out. What could he possibly want to discuss? Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. When 3:00 finally arrived, she untied her apron with shaking hands and slid into the booth across from him. "I need to be honest with you," James said right away. "Last night got me thinking about some things I'd forgotten about my own life." James closed his laptop and looked directly at Claire. 20 years ago, my mother was diagnosed with early Alzheimer's disease. I was just starting my business, barely making enough money to survive, and suddenly I was facing the same impossible choices you're dealing with now. Claire's eyes widened in surprise. She'd expected him to offer charity, not share his own story. "I know what it's like to work yourself to exhaustion trying to save someone you love. I know what it's like to feel like you're never doing enough." His voice carried the weight of old pain, but also understanding. "The difference was, I got lucky. My business became successful just when I needed it most, but I never forgot what it felt like to be desperate and alone." James reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. "I run a foundation that helps families dealing with long-term medical care. It's not charity, Claire. It's recognition that sometimes good people get dealt impossible situations." Claire stared at the card, afraid to hope. "We provide grants for experimental treatments, help with care home costs, and offer low-interest loans for families who need bridge funding." "Why?" Claire asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you do this for someone you barely know?" James smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked vulnerable. "Because someone should have been there for my mother and me. Because good people shouldn't have to choose between their own well-being and caring for their family. And because—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Because I recognize strength when I see it, and you have more of it than you realize." Claire felt tears starting to form, but these were different from the frustrated tears of the night before. These came from a place of relief so deep it was almost overwhelming. "I don't know what to say," she managed. "Say you'll let me help," James replied. "Say you'll apply for the grant. Say you'll stop trying to carry this burden alone." He slid a folder across the table. "The application is straightforward and the board meets next week. If your mother is a candidate for the treatment her doctor recommended, we can likely cover the full cost." The diner had emptied around them while they talked, and the late afternoon sun was streaming through the windows. Claire opened the folder with trembling hands, scanning the simple application forms inside. "This is real?" she asked, still not quite believing it. "It's real," James confirmed. "And Claire, you don't need to pretend that last night didn't happen. Sometimes the hardest moments lead to the most important connections." If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. Claire looked up at him, seeing clearly for the first time that this wasn't about pity or guilt. This was about one person who understood reaching out to another. 6 months later, Claire stood in the sunny garden of Willowbrook Care Center, watching her mother take care of the tomato plants she'd started from seeds. The new treatment had been really successful, slowing down her condition and giving her more good days than bad ones. "The tomatoes are coming along nicely," her mother said, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "They remind me of the ones we used to grow when you were little." Claire smiled, remembering those summer afternoons in their tiny backyard garden. "Mom, there's someone I'd like you to meet," Claire said gently. James walked over from the pathway, carrying a small potted plant. Claire had stayed in touch with him throughout her mother's treatment, sending updates and photos, slowly building a friendship based on mutual respect rather than crisis. "Mrs. Martinez, it's wonderful to finally meet you," James said, offering the plant. "Claire's told me so much about your gardening skills. I thought you might like to try growing basil." Claire's mother accepted the gift with delight, immediately starting detailed plans for where it would go in the garden. As they walked back toward the care center later, Claire's mother linked arms with both of them. "You know, Claire, I may be losing some of my memories, but I can still recognize when someone cares about my daughter." She patted James's arm lovingly. "Thank you for reminding her that accepting help isn't the same as giving up." James glanced at Claire, who was blinking back tears. "Actually, Mrs. Martinez, your daughter taught me something important too. She showed me that real strength isn't about solving everything yourself. It's about keeping going even when the solutions aren't clear." Over the following weeks, Claire and James continued to meet for coffee, their conversations ranging from her mother's progress to his foundation's work to their shared love of old movies. What had begun as a chance meeting in an alley had grown into something neither of them had expected, a deep friendship built on understanding and respect. Claire had returned to school part-time, studying social work with the goal of eventually joining James's foundation. "I want to be the person for someone else that you were for me," she told him on a crisp autumn evening. As they sat on a bench outside Murphy's diner where they'd first really talked, James turned to Claire with a smile. "You know, I used to think successful people were the ones who never needed help. Now I realize the most successful people are the ones who know how to both give and receive it." Claire nodded, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "I'm glad I didn't pretend to forget that night," she said softly. "I'm glad you didn't let me." James reached over and squeezed her hand gently. "Some moments are too important to forget, even the embarrassing ones." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Claire thought about how much her life had changed. Her mother was doing well. She was chasing her dreams again, and she'd found a friendship that had taught her the true meaning of grace. The scared, overwhelmed woman who'd hidden in an alley 6 months ago felt like a distant memory, replaced by someone who understood that strength and vulnerability could exist together. "Thank you," she whispered. But James shook his head. "Thank you, Claire, for trusting me with your story, for letting me be part of the solution, for reminding me why the foundation matters." If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Their friendship had become a light of hope, proving that sometimes the most unexpected meetings can lead to the most meaningful connections. As they sat together in comfortable silence, both knew they'd found something precious, the knowledge that they were no longer facing life's challenges alone.